Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. Thank you for joining us today as we continue our conversation about the N-word. If you tuned in yesterday, you heard a discussion about the word, its usage, and the impact. We welcomed 3 Nashville luminaries who were gracious in sharing their perspectives and experiences. We also opened up the phone lines to hear what you had to say about what I call the most complicated word in the American English language. Now, today we're talking with some younger Nashvillians about the N-word and how it's used in public spaces, notably in hip-hop and rap music, as well as in the world of stand-up comedy. We're fully aware that this word is a subject that is difficult. So we're recording live, and we're required to hit the 5-second dump button every time somebody uses the N-word during the broadcast. This causes an odd break in the dialogue. You can hear the uncut version of today's show later on in the podcast version. So one of the places where you hear the N-word often, sometimes gratuitously, is in hip-hop and rap music. The word has been in lyrics of MCs and rappers as long as MCing and rapping has been a thing. What do artists mean when they use the word? How did a song, inspire a book about one artist's search for the word's origins? My next guest is here to talk about that. P.E. McCollum, a.k.a. Pal Shadows, is a hip-hop artist and organizer who wrote the book NGR, What Does It Mean? An expose on the N-word from a hip-hop perspective. He's a former guest of the show who appeared on our Beats and Rhymes episode. I'd like to welcome him back to This Is Nashville. Pal, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me once again, Khalil. Peace and love.
Peace and love, my man. So you're an artist who's been making hip-hop music for decades. Yeah. Let me ask you, has the N-word been a part of your lyrics?
That's a great question, Khalil. Yes. In short, the short answer, yes, it has.
Has it always been that way?
Yes, Khalil. And, I've gone through periods with it where I started out using it because I started out as a gangster rapper. A lot of people don't know that. Pal Shadows was a gangster rapper. But as consciousness came to me and as certain information came, like the knowledge of self and all of that, looking at the N-word as bad, or like how Chris Rock talked about, the N-word. And I love black people, but I hate N-words, then I stopped using it. But then over time, it creeped back in. It creeped back in. So
what was it like when it crept back into your lyrics?
It was like freedom of expression. And like Tupac said, like in my book, I talk about, the NIGGA, never ignorant, getting goals accomplished. And I was like, yeah, I can dig that. And then I felt like maybe I'm saying this now today, as I say, maybe I had that affinity because deep down somewhere in my DNA, I knew that it started somewhere positive and then turned negative. Maybe I knew that in my DNA, but I never was offended by the word. Only when I was called it with the hard R in a negative term, then I was. But I would always be offended if anybody called me any word with a negative tone. I hate that black man over there. I wouldn't like that either.
I understand where you're coming from. So you wrote the book, Exploring the N-word and its relationship to hip-hop culture. Tell me, why did you write the book?
Well, I really wanted to, I've been wanting to write a book for a while, and I wanted to be hip-hop oriented. Writing is one of my strong points. And then, I said, okay, my first book has to be dynamic. I wanted to be dynamic with some good content. And I just thought about it. It just hit me one day. I tell you what, I have a song called NGR because I do have a music project to go along with the book NGR, What Does It Mean? An expose on the N-word from a hip-hop perspective. But I have a music project called the NGR Project. And I wanted to, I played it for some white friends of mine, some quote-unquote white friends of mine. And then one of my songs, it was like, I used the hard R. And he was like, wow, pal, that's bold. I looked at him to see his response, and he was like, it's like, that don't offend you in any kind of way, that don't make you, he was like, nah, actually, I think that's very interesting that you were bold enough to say it and do that. Nobody really, and that got me thinking, maybe, if he can handle it, maybe and he's somebody I know that's of European descent, maybe the rest of the quote unquote white community can handle this content, because I know my people can handle it. The black and indigenous people of the world, we don't have a problem with the word, but can these white people who are using it every day in their vernacular now, they're especially the young ones from the hood that walk up on me from the hip hop community and say, "Yo, my," and they've done that, and multiple occasions I've had white people use that word to me. So that's what made me write the book, was just all of this controversy. The N-word is considered the most offensive word in the English language. It's the most offensive word, not anything else. The N-word is the most offensive word in the English language. So these types of things is what made me write the book. And also hearing NGR and Negus and Nagas in other people's lectures, I was like, what is this about? It made me do research. So those are all of those things.
I want to ask you about the research you've done a little bit later, but talk about the sensitivities that you approached the project with, seeing that, different people take this word differently, and yet you're trying to communicate to a wide swath of folks as possible. How did you approach that with the sensitivity that's necessary?
First of all, I thought about my mom.
Okay.
My mom was I said, my mom's going to want to know, my son just wrote a book, so she's going to check it out. And my mom was someone who, over the years, despised my use of the word. I mean, early on, if she heard me and my cousin using the word, "Oh, don't y'all be saying that word. Don't y'all be using that word." But me and my friends used it as a term of endearment from day one, Khalil. Mm-hmm. It was a term of endearment. We had no negative connotations. I mean, since my earliest times. But my mom, thinking of her and all the other elders. In the book, I talk about that there was in 2 different cities, in Detroit and in Houston, there was a funeral. There were 2 funerals for the N-word, with a whole procession, caskets, fake casket, mock burials, and everything from our elders. And people came out and spoke, and they buried. We as a community, our elders buried the N-word. So, and finding all this out in the research, it made me, and my mom and the other elders in my family made me say, let me approach this with sensitivity, because I know it's a sensitive word. I am not one to throw the word around. And in fact, all the people, white cats that's listening, I always respected the quote unquote white folk who had sensitivity to me about the N-word and didn't use it, willy-nilly around me. I always respected those kind of white cats, white friends of mine who had that respect.
How did your mother and the elders in your family react once you published the book?
I got to laugh again, because when my mom heard, like I said, I have a music project to go with it called the NGR Project, available on Spotify. So the NGR Project. And basically the NGR Project, I let my mom hear the first song called NGR. And when she heard that, she despised it. She was like, this is not it. This is not it, son. And I said, okay. I knew she might respond like that, but I thought that at the same time, she could appreciate the research aspect of it, the scholarly aspect.
Did she ever come around to appreciate it?
She finally, once I wrote the book, she finally did come around, and I think she was just more or less proud that her son wrote a book and did something positive. But she did read it, and she actually ended up saying, I see where you were coming from.
Okay. Now talk to me a little bit about the writing and research process for this book. What did you do? Briefly.
The writing and research project for the book was very extensive. I found myself working from home during this period, and I said, I got a lot of time on my hand. So I decided to do something constructive with that time and write this book. So it was 6 to 8 hours a day for about 4.5 months. And then, of course, the 3 weeks of editing, and then the actual publishing and everything. So the writing process was like, get my coffee, and dig, and just dig. I encourage everybody to dig deep. And I wanted to tackle this. So anything that I could find, certain books that were referred to me. I read certain papers. I read papers, books, like E.A. Wallace Budge's book, An Egyptian Hieroglyphic Dictionary. I read that. Philip Chidi Njamanzi's book on the Yoruba writer on the Yahweh culture, and where, for instance, he talks about Ngaori, the N word coming from Ngaori, which Ngaori is a Nigerian word which means place of God. But if you remove all the vowels in Ngaori, then there's NGR that's left.
Okay. So what did you discover about the N-word?
Khalil, and I hope I answered your question. Did I answer your question about the writing process? What I discovered about the N-word was that aside from being the most controversial word, it's the most interesting word in the English language. It started out in ancient Africa, what we call Africa today, among the people that we today call Africans. And it meant, in ancient Egypt, for instance, which we know as Kemet, it meant emperor or ruler or king. In ancient Ethiopia, it appeared in the ancient Ge'ez language as the word Negus, like Emperor Haile Selassie I, Jah Rastafari of the Rasta culture, is known as Negus Negas, which means the King of Kings. These are the origins of the N-word, and in ancient Egypt, NGR is the title of my book. That's the primary one. But also in ancient India, I found was very interesting that the ancient Indians are descendants of the ancient Kushites or the ancient Ethiopians. They were the original ancient Indians, and they used the term Nagas to refer to their king. So, and then over time, I noticed that the Greeks, once they invaded the Nile Valley, they took the word and it appeared in Latin, but now it becomes descriptive and it becomes Niger. They add vowel sounds because in NGR, the ancient languages did not have vowel sounds. It was just NGR. These sounds were added, and in Greek and Latin, it became Niger, which is Latin for black. And then Spanish is Negro, which if you remove the vowels from Negro, you have NGR also. And then I found that over the time between the interactions of the quote-unquote black people, these Africans and the Europeans, as the view and the opinions of the Europeans shifted about the black people and the Africans, then the meaning of the N-word shifted and changed as well. And then it became as something that originally meant something aggrandizing and positive, like emperor, ruler, king, deity, to something derogatory.
Okay, so that's your understanding of the word and its origins. Briefly, how did that process of writing the book, how did it impact you when you finished it?
It's funny because I have white and black friends, quote unquote white and black friends, two terms I don't really care for. But the way it impacted, I noticed that some of my white Caucasian friends were worried that they were concerned that my attitude was shifting. But what it was that I was serious about the project. And they were just like, I think they were wondering, how can you be diving this deep on the N-word and not be mad, in some kind of way? But here's what I came up with. What I realized that black pain does not have to equal white guilt. So if I'm ever just writing anything about something that affects the black culture, and the N-word certainly has affected us pain-wise because it was used in a very derogatory sense, even though it came from something positive. And we were called that as dogs were sicked on us, as we were lynched, and the pain is deep. But that pain does not have to equal white guilt. But I felt like I became more enriched. It did not make me angry at all, because I think knowledge and understanding makes you more peaceful and makes you more calm, because you now can approach things from an intellectual and a mental standpoint rather than physical.
All right. Now, also with us is Mike Floss, Nashvilleian and hip-hop artist. He also works as an activist and organizer and is a former guest of the show. Mike, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, man, appreciate you having me.
Hip-hop is a word that's used so often. I was looking up songs that have N-word in the title, and I found a list that was pages and pages long.
Yeah.
There's famous groups with N-word in their title, NWA most notably. I'm curious about the proliferation in the N-word, and has it possibly desensitized listeners of hip-hop to it? What are your thoughts?
I think it can. I think it's possible. I think you would have to take it on a case-by-case basis, though, because every artist is coming from a different context. So to me, I mean, just to kind of agree with something that Powell was saying, is it's all about the meaning behind what you say, more so than what you say, like why you're doing something or why you're saying something. So I think that's most important. I think the sensitivity towards it could be useful, and I also think it could become distracting. So, I mean, it all depends on the context.
Do you use the word in your songs?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Have you ever struggled using the word?
More so than using the word, I struggle with using my experience. So sometimes you find, as an artist, you find yourself in front of groups of people that do not share your same experience. So everything that you're saying may feel totally different. You know, they may think you're glorifying the thing where you're talking about how badly it hurt you, or they may think you're talking about being in pain and you're talking about being in love. You know what I'm saying? Just because of their preconceived notions of what the words you're saying are, and they don't share your experience. So that becomes really awkward as a performer when you're standing on stage and then you look in a crowd and it's a bunch of people that don't look nothing like you and don't feel nothing like you.
But they're saying every word.
They're nodding their head to it. They may not be saying every word, but they're enjoying music that actually may be like not supposed to be the fun record. You feel me? So I think experiences and context really are more a heavy weight than just the word itself.
You know, some MCs rarely curse in their music. I'm thinking about the legendary MC Rakim. Many credit he brought a new level of innovation to hip-hop back in the 80s and MCing in the 80s. He doesn't swear in his music at all, but he uses the N-word. You know, and artist choice is artist choice. It seems that, but it's interesting to me that the N-word is given a pass when swear words are kind of prohibited by certain artists. What do you think?
When you say prohibited, you mean like on the radio, or what do you mean?
Well, no, they just choose not to use it. Fresh Prince is Will Smith, and some of his records didn't really curse, but the N-word comes out.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I look at writers a lot like I look at painters and visual artists. You feel me? Like I think certain words can be the color red. So if you want to use the color red in your painting, you may want to use a word that could strike the ear as something that's like, oh, that's a lot to hear at one time. But I'm trying to create a visceral reaction because that's the feeling that this song is supposed to generate, you know. And sometimes you got to step on people's toes to make them wake up. Like I think Lauryn Hill has a line about that too, and it's about art, and it is about like feelings and vibe, but it's also about the energy that you're trying to create and stimulate in the listener. So I think all of those choices is up to whoever makes the choice, but I think that's why it's happening.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekulona. We're talking this hour about the usage of the N-word in hip-hop and rap music. My guests are P.E. McCollum, a.k.a. Pal Shadows, and Mike Floss. You can join the conversation by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. Question for you both. Is there a difference between hip-hop and rap music when it comes to the N-word? Pal, from your experience, where do you find the word being used the most?
Well, first of all, hip-hop is rap. Rap is hip-hop, rhythm and poetry, but it was separated due to the industrialization of the art forms, so now it is different. So in rap music, which is commercialized music in my opinion, it is hip-hop that does not focus on the breakbeat. And it focuses on 808s, hi-hats, and things like that. That's more rap. Hip-hop focuses on five elements, MCing, DJing, graffiti art, breaking, and beatboxing, production. So in rap music, I find it's used mostly because in hip-hop, where you find MCs are more griots, and they are more lyrical. And when you're more lyrical, you have more uses, expansions of your wordplay. And with rap, it's party stuff. They're not trying to get you to think really. So and so the vocabulary becomes more limited. It's not focused on being lyrical. It's more vibey. And in that situation, I feel like the N-word is going to get thrown out more just because off the rip, because they're not really expanding their vocabulary there. But I think that both use it as a term of endearment, though. There's not many, in my findings, there's no Black and Indigenous people who use this word derogatory, as meaning derogatory in its original sense when they use it. However, it can become derogatory when they are angry at one another, Black and Indigenous people, and then use it as the same derogatory way that slave masters and people used it.
Mike?
Man, I think I agree and disagree with some of what you said, pal, but I think the beauty of context, again, with like subgenres that exist inside of hip hop, to me, they may not exist on like radio stations and award ceremonies, but in my opinion, there's subgenres, and I don't think rap is necessarily like the dumbed down version of hip hop or like a thing that's like a lower tier of art. I just think it's a different form. I think it's a different medium. Depending on the subgenre, and I consider myself a rapper. You know, I also consider myself a hip hop artist. I see fashion brands that I feel like that's a hip hop fashion brand. You know what I mean?
Do you consider yourself an MC?
No, I never call myself an MC, but I think.
Okay, all right. That's context.
I think I rap better than a lot of people that consider themselves MCs. But I think I also think like in this day and age, like MCing kind of implies a nostalgic and like vintage form of the art, and I feel myself being as a more of an Afrofuturist. But I think
I like it.
I think one thing that always struck me, and Michael Eric Dyson says a lot of things that I disagree with as well, but one thing I do agree with that he said was black people's ability to have linguistic malleability, where we can take something that may mean something in one culture and use it and change it and mold it and form it to be something useful, which is kind of what the idea of blackness in this country is finding things that may not be designed for our good and finding a way to salvage something out of it. So I think that in the usage of language and in the usage of art is what we do.
Yeah, yesterday, in our discussion, one of our guests, Reverend Davey Tucker, talked about a scenario from a movie where a white man loved a particular hip-hop song, had the N-word in it. When he was around his black friend, he would sing the song but omit from singing that word. But when he was by himself, he sang all of the lyrics, you know? And, you know, I've been in conversations with non-black people who struggle with that. They love a song or they love an artist, but they refrain from using the word. And each person has their own way to approach this. And Mike, you kind of talked about it earlier when you talked about, you know, performing in crowds who don't look like you. But let me ask, how would you advise a non-black person how to approach a song that has the N-word in it? Perhaps it may be even one of your songs. What would you say to that person?
Don't say it. It's very simple. I think it's very simple. I think people often choose to be willfully ignorant and ignore the historical context of that term. And also, I think it's an invitation for you to experience what black people experience every day with being excluded from things that they enjoy. So if you feel as though you want to be an ally or want to be in support of this culture and of this people, to understand that that's an opportunity for you to feel some of that exclusion that we have not been able to rid ourselves from since we stepped foot on this country.
Pal?
So, first and foremost, I don't think that rap is a dumbed down version of hip hop.
Okay.
You know, I respect Migos, and they're one of my favorite groups. Just wanted to put that out there. In terms of, repeat your question, Khalil.
You know, how would you advise a person who's non-black, who loves a song, maybe they love Tupac, who's got an album, Strictly For My Ends, and they want to sing the title track?
Oh, all right. Back to his don't do it statement. Okay. Like I say, I got a chapter in the book, a section in the book where I talk about white people using the, quote unquote, whites using the N-word. And listen, I'm not here to tell you to use it or not. Like I say, remember there's consequence to everything that you think, do, and say. And whereas somebody like me or Mike Floss, we might not pop off when somebody says that, when a white person says it. But there are certain black and indigenous people who will definitely pop off when you use that.
I'm one of them.
So, okay, so Mike Floss might just pop off on you. Pal Shadows, I might not. I might laugh at you. You know what I'm saying? When you call me that, because I know the whole context of the word. I literally wrote the book on it. So for me, it's a little bit different. For Mike, it's a little bit different. But like I say in the book, you got to respect both points of view, you know, and you better respect both points of view because, hey, there's another section in my book called At Your Own Risk. And I think that's the Mike Floss aspect.
Potentially.
So, at your own risk.
I really want to thank both of you for coming on and having this conversation. My guests are Mike Floss, hip-hop artist and organizer, and P.E. McCollum, a.k.a. Pal Shadows, hip-hop artist and author of the book NGR, What Does It Mean? An expose on the N-word from a hip-hop perspective. Again, thanks to you both for being here. Really appreciate it, fellas.
Thanks for having us.
Peace, peace.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the other public forum where you hear the N-word being used, the world of stand-up comedy. You can share your thoughts with us by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. We're discussing the N-word. It's actually part 2 of our conversation. To hear part 1, check out our podcast version. Today, we're looking at the public spaces where you're most likely to hear the word. Now, before the break, we talked about the usage of the word in hip hop and rap music. Now let's turn to the world of comedy, specifically the stand-up comedy circuit. Joining me now is a comedian who spent years doing stand-up comedy, and he's a former guest of the show. I'd like to welcome comedian Brad Sativa back to This Is Nashville. Brad, thanks for being here, my man.
Man, yeah, thank y'all for having me.
Okay, note for listeners, we are recording live and we're required to hit a 5-second dump button every time someone uses the N-word. It causes really a little bit of an odd-sounding break in the dialogue, but you can hear the uncut version of today's show later on in the podcast. Brad, let me ask you, do you use the N-word in your stand-up comedy sets?
Yes, I do, but in a very limited capacity. For one, because like performing in mainstream rooms, which is considered white rooms, I'm not just going to be freelance just throwing like nigga around. Like I do have jokes that it makes sense for me to use it, so I'll use it in those jokes. But yeah, I don't just do it in a cavalier way, but do it for actually a reason or context.
When was the first time you heard the word in your life?
Man, I was thinking about that. I'm thinking it's like my grandma. You know what I'm saying? My grandma called like, because I'm like the baby of all the grandkids, so all the grandkids was over there. But yeah, my grandma would definitely use that word. You know what I'm saying? For sure.
When was the first time the word was used against you?
Yes, I had to be maybe in 3rd, 4th grade. It was like this kid maybe in like, he was like in 1st grade, but he called me a nigga on the bus, and I remember hitting him with a blow pop, bro.
Wow.
Tried to hurt that kid too, for real. I was like, but yeah, I remember I'm like, I don't know. But I knew early on though, I was very aware that I was black. I was very aware of stereotypes very early in. So I had a very like strong mind against like people that I consider like try to be authority over me or try to use any kind of force like that.
That, you know, when I talk to people in life and on the show yesterday, it kind of seems the average is like 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade is where a lot of people have the word used against them. That's pretty early on, but you become a little bit aware about the world. Now, if we look at the history of black comics, we see that they've pretty much used the word. Red Fox, Richard Pryor, Robin Harris, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, Cat Williams, the list goes on. Here's a clip from a Richard Pryor set from 1972. It's called Eulogy.
We are gathered here today on this sorrowful occasion to say goodbye to the dearly departed. He was dearly and he has departed. Thus, that's why we call him the dearly departed. In other words, the nigga dead. As you can see him laying here, I've been here 3 days, the boy ain't moved a muscle. So I know the nigga dead. And it seemed that death was quite a surprise to his ass. Didn't think you was ever gonna die, did you, nigga? I told you about fucking around what was gonna happen.
Okay, so he uses the word effectively like people do colloquially. It kind of flowed out of him. But I'm curious, when you first got into comedy, Brad, did you feel pressure to use the word?
Not really, because like I said, I've been around white people my whole life, so I've never, you know what I'm saying. So I've always like conducted myself or know how to conduct myself around white people. Like even around there, I'm not just throwing nigga around, even with my white friends like that, not too casually. Just because, like I said, I don't even want them to get the idea of thinking that it's kind of okay or it's pretty no go with me. You know what I'm saying? And so. Yeah, but when I first got in, yeah, I kind of was, like I said, conscientious of what I was using, just because even now it's like this week is like my 9th year doing comedy. And
Congratulations.
So, yeah, I appreciate it. And even just it's been a cultural change in the last 9-10 years that's been pretty significant. So it's jokes that I would reword now than when I started 9 years ago, just because of just the more education, more information out there. You know what I'm saying? Like before I get an idea, it's like before you can do a lot of stuff in ignorance. But it's like once you learn what stuff about people and that they can hurt people for real, and like you kind of like try to walk it a little bit back. You know what I'm saying? I do have growth in that kind of way. So
stand-up comedy is one avenue, but there's also sketch comedy out there. You do sketch comedy as well.
I do.
Is the word used in sketch comedy at the same rate as it is in stand-up?
I'd see that it just depends. It's I get an idea. You got somebody like Chappelle who does have a good mainstream base, which would mean a lot of white people, a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So him using nigga is different from Cat Williams or Cedric the Entertainer or some other like known to consider themselves urban. You know what I'm saying, or black comics for a black audience. You know what I'm saying? So if you're using, like Bernie Mac if he using like nigga in front of people, he knows that 90% of his audience is black. And he knows that you know what I'm saying? So that it's a relation thing and he's relating. But like I said, it's a difference. He go up there, use nigga 100 times in front of 1,000 white people. That, you know what I'm saying? Some just feel weird about that. You know what I'm saying? For me, you know what I'm saying? Like Chappelle, like he always keeps you know what I'm saying, he stays pretty aware of what's going on, even though he might abide or not abide. But he does know what's going on.
You know, we couldn't have a show about the N-word and about comedy without hearing from Nashville Public Radio's Blaction team. In this quick adventure, they're posed with an interesting conundrum. The date is August 6, 2023. The place, somewhere in Nashville, but most likely East Nashville. Let's listen.
Hey, how are you? Oh my God, it's been so long since we've seen each other.
Hey. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Did you see this?
See what?
This big fight that happened at the riverfront in Montgomery yesterday.
What?
It was wild.
What happened?
Well, there's this group of drunk folks who were blocking the dock with their boat. And it's important to say that all the drunk people are white, okay? And then there's this guy who works on the docks, and he's black. And he's asking the people to move their boat so that this big-ass river boat can dock. It's like a tourist sightseeing thing.
Okay.
And then the drunk people, they get all rude and confront the man who's just doing his job. They're pointing, and Lord knows what they're saying, but you can see... Here, hold on, let me rewind. Yeah, right there. You see the dock worker throw his hat off like it is on.
Oh, he looks fed up.
Right? So that's when the fists start flying, and it's like 7-on-1.
Oh, that's just wrong.
Yeah, but okay, it doesn't stop there. You can see here in the water, this young dude jumps from the boat and swims to help his colleagues deal with these drunk fools.
Look, there's other workers coming to the rescue as well.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really real for the drunk folks. Take a look. So there's young men, old men, and even some women are getting into it. Fighting, throwing punches. It was a mess.
Oh my God, what is going on?
Yeah, and then more people get involved, and it turns into a whole brawl. And then there's this part. Okay, this man, look at him. He's grabbing this plastic folding chair and uses it in the brawl.
What?
Yeah, he's just swinging this thing around like he's Paul Bunyan or something.
Paul Bunyan!
And when a woman with the drunk boaters steps to him, he hits her in the head.
Oh, my.
I know. At first I was like, wow, that lady got hit in the head with a chair. But then I said to myself, that deserved it.
Hold up! Wait a minute! Action team, go!
I'm sorry, man, but you're in violation of Language Code 5.672323, subsection 9, paragraph 8, where it clearly states that any person who is not of African descent cannot use
I think there's a misunderstanding.
What you're misunderstanding is that it is not cool for you to use that word.
Hey, look, we understand that you are an ally, but you can't just go around using that word. That's what makes you not an ally anymore.
I just want it to be known that I'm the staunchest of allies.
I am too. I was referring to the white woman when I said it. And I used an A, not the hard R.
Oh, hold up. You was talking about a white person?
Wait a second. We didn't go over this in our training. Look, I don't know what we should do. Khalil, what does the manual say?
Okay, hold up. Okay. Looking at the manual, it reads, when a person of non-African descent uses the N-word to talk about another person who is not of African descent, please refer to the appendix as this section has been updated.
Well?
Okay, hold up. Oh, yes, okay. Let's get to the appendix. Okay, here it is. It says, this section has not been completed and has been waiting for an update since 1983.
Before I was born.
Please proceed at your own risk.
Damn. I don't know what we should do.
I mean, we could write up a citation, but that feels like it'd be kind of wrong.
That's why we needed more than 3 weeks of training, man.
That's what happens when you pay $35.
So am I free to go?
Yeah, you go. Go ahead. I'm hungry anyway.
Y'all hungry? We had the Cracker Barrel. These pancakes are so crispy.
Mm-hmm, they are too.
I'm kind of hungry.
You can only have avocado toast so many times a week. Am I right?
Man, don't make me write you up.
All right, joining me now is my partner on the Blacktion team. This is Nashville producer Elizabeth Burton. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hello.
How's it
going? Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here. Okay, so listening to that skit, what are your thoughts about that situation, about a white person using the N-word to describe another white person?
You know, when you brought it up, when we were writing these, I thought it was funny, but like the more I think about it, there's so many words in the English language. There's so many words. I'm like, why do people feel so insistent that they need to say this one? I'm like, there's a lot of ways to call somebody crazy or dumb or whatever they would be trying to get across in this hypothetical scenario. But I'm like, y'all, say something else, please. Please.
Yeah, I understand. Brad?
That's called the Morgan Wallen. That's that move called. That's the Morgan Wallen. That's what he did. You know what I'm saying? So, but somebody they be like, oh, you trying to do the Morgan Wallen? You can call him out for that.
Okay.
Like I have a joke about when I actually met Kid Rock, and it was even crazier. It was like he used the N-word, describe, like he said that D.L. Hughley. So we having a conversation, and he was like, I came in late, and D.L. Hughley was like, Kid Rock, you one crazy ass white nigga, and he said this story to me, and I'm looking at this fool, I'm like, that's what Wild says. Well, he just used like nigga in the third person with a white, like with a black dude calling you the word. Yeah. So it was like he trying to, like it was, I say that was the funny part about it. Like, yeah, it ain't funny, but it was still like, that was, you try to find the humor in whatever, you know what I'm saying?
Nice.
So, but yeah, it's people do crazy stuff like that. Like, also I'll say this, like, if you go out to California, it's a known thing in California, everybody just use nigga cavalier. Like, it don't matter if you're Asian, if you're black, you're white, you're Hispanic, they all use it very loosely in the West Coast, especially if you're young. You know what I'm saying? Anybody from like 25 and under, they're going to just be using that word, throwing it all around.
Now, recently interviewing kids for another story, managing editor Tasha A.F. Lemley captured a conversation between young white boys discussing the usage of the N-word. The oldest is really trying to educate the younger ones. Let's listen.
The N-word is like kind of used before a word. Like you say, a black person would say N-word this to enforce, like they really want you to do this, so they use this word to enforce, do this. You know what I mean? It's not mean, it's not, most of the time, it's not intended to be mean. It's just a word that flows with their vocabulary because it's been kind of handed down and they've adopted it into their they've adopted it into their community. It's their word. They say it, and it's almost never meant to be me. But not for white people, only for black people.
Why are you guys even talking about that?
I mean, so what do y'all think about that? I mean, Miss Clemmy Greenlee, guest yesterday, said that, kids use it because they don't know about the history of it. People have to teach them. It sounds like these young men are taking it upon their own hands.
That's the ability that kids have now. It's like that's when, like I said, referring back to material, that's when it's like when they try to ban stuff, it's like these kids have the internet now. It's like, so you can tell kids whatever, they can just look up and find out the real history or real conversations about a lot of things now. You can't just ban them from that. And that's also conversations should be had around it. Like if you're a white person that you go to school with black people that you consider your real good friends, when they tell you that the curriculum is off, that should be something you should want to know what is off about it if you're a true friend and ally and if you truly want to know things. So that's why I do think a lot of white people need to take responsibility for that, especially if they banning history going forward. That if you consider yourself hanging and entertaining black people and bringing them into your homes or going to their homes, it's certain responsibility that you should kind of know what black people have to deal with.
Elizabeth, real briefly.
I mean, my mom would love that. She teaches third grade. She loved how he broke down the context and the appropriate use. I think that's pretty cool that, like you're saying, despite all these different bans and things like that, kids are still trying to educate each other and keep each other on the up and up.
Yeah, I think it's up for all of us to keep each other on the up and up. I want to thank both of my guests so much. Comedian Brad Sativa, thank you for being here. And producer and Blackson team member Elizabeth Burton, thanks to you both for being with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Let's take one more quick break. We got to take this short break, but when we come back, we'll hear from my father, my dad, about his thoughts on the N-word. You can join the conversation by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. These past 2 days have been host to some intense, sensitive, and if you ask me, necessary conversations about the N-word. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I think it's the most complicated word in the American English language. People have bled and died because of this word. People have also laughed and celebrated over this word as well. Everyone has their thoughts and feelings about the word. If you use it regularly, rarely, or the word never comes across your lips, that is your choice. How you respond when others use the word is also your choice. Context is important, but history is imperative. When sharing my plans for these shows about the N-word with my father a few weeks ago, he asked me if he could offer some thoughts. After a bit of phone tag, some retired people truly make their own schedules. I was able to record some of what my father had to say. So here's my dad, Ademola Ekulona, with his thoughts about the N-word.
My name is Ademola Ekulona. Well, I've been alive for 77 years and done all kinds of little odd jobs. I've been a floor scraper, a newspaper boy, a clerk, and a messenger. Then I became a TV news reporter, producer, and then I moved into writing and producing corporate video, and also did a lot of community work. When I retired, I was directing a anti-violence program in Baltimore City. I still work doing rites of passage, advising and consulting. I'm a student of the narratives of the persons who were enslaved or had been enslaved in the United States. And when you read the narratives, you see that that term had been accepted because certain whites would use it, and they would use it for certain purposes. But the intent of it was to dehumanize, because it has no definition other than its function to dehumanize and to categorize a human being so that they would not even imagine deserving agency or self-determination. It's a term that carries a specific insult to the individual that is symbolic of the kind of human abuses that the Africans had to endure as they became Americans. There was terror, intentional fear in the system of white supremacy, creating grounds that would make it difficult for any African American to do anything outside of the structures of that system. What bothers me most is that it is symbolic of the lack of agency that was expected of anyone who would be called that word. You were not supposed to have any ability or even awareness that you could do something for yourself. You had to be oriented toward the persons who needed that word to institute the processes of white supremacy. There was not one N who got off of a slave ship. They became N's here on the auction block and throughout the practices of enslavement. And so they didn't come from Africa with that, and their descendants should not accept it because the descendant has no meaning. If your destiny is that of an N, then you have to wait for somebody to define you. You certainly can't take any action outside of the scope of what that definer would allow. I've heard people in hip-hop culture say that it's a term of endearment. Well, it's the term of endearment that is a curse. If you accept it, it is a curse. But you're saying that you can be manipulated and purchased by other people, so you don't need agency. You don't have the authority to claim your own sense of self. And you must accept the designation from outside of yourself. How could I dare walk into the public library and sit at the table where there were white people? What do you mean? You don't belong in this library. Well, in the 1950s, that's what I had to do. I had to experience. I knew that if I heard the word uttered, I knew that it was targeted for me to hear and that there was reasoning behind it, often to provoke me into making some kind of display or to get up and leave. Well, I learned to endure it stoically. If I came to the library for research or reading, and it wasn't to correspond with anybody, so except the librarian, so they weren't going to get it from me. And that puts you in the settings, because I was on the tip of the spear of the civil rights movement. Integrating things became part of my adolescent defiance. If they said, well, black people don't go up there, well, I would go. And I'd go in the front door, turn it into, we will be integrated whether anybody likes it or not. And now I don't think that's necessary, but it's certainly that word would mean that there were people around who wanted to perpetuate the system of white supremacy. Where did it come from? The system of white supremacy. And where is it useful? In the system of white supremacy that can be accepted by people who are victims of that system of white supremacy. What is so shocking is that even in the midst of the Black consciousness movement, that word was not completely expunged from African American colloquialisms. And it's just alarming that we have a younger generation that has completely endorsed it. It's symbolic of the application of white supremacy over the lives and therefore the destinies of African people. And so I completely oppose it. I hope that the people who invented hip-hop and these people who invented the commercialization of that word that benefited the hip-hop industry, they have to clean it up. There should be something that they're able to put into a couplet that allows the young people to realize that it was a mistake. If you're going to be part of the canon of African American creativity and music, clean it up, because the children should not need to hear that 100 years from now. You know, they're listening to the oldies. You know, I got 6 children, so I didn't really have a life until they all turned 25, and that's been a few years ago. Yeah, so that's about it.
Thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by yours truly with some help from Elizabeth Burton. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our board operator is Liv Lombardi. Live tweeting handled by Elizabeth Burton. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Willie Big Fella Sims, Keri Pagetta, Magnolia McKay, Blaze Gainey, and Catherine Cece's. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekulona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.